If you own a business in the skilled trades, HVAC, plumbing, electrical, and you want to know how to grow it to the point where your value is going to increase in the business, we're going to find out how we do that. We're also going to talk about how to eventually sell your business on part two of this podcast. So we got John Bartlett. Now, he is with Brentwood Growth, and they're a merger and acquisition consultant. And in part one of this, John's going to take us through some stuff about how to really grow a business to the point where it is more valuable, right? And that is the focus of this podcast. Part two, we're going to go on and talk about how we go about potentially selling our business. So this is a good conversation, guys. This is the HVAC Know It All podcast. I'm your host, Gary McCreadie. This podcast is sponsored by Cool Air Products, Master, Cintas, and SupplyHouse.com. Go to the show notes and click on the links to check these guys out. All right, John, thanks for reaching out to me on LinkedIn. And it is a topic that I think needs to be talked about. And that's when you get to the point of building a business and you want to step away from it because you're getting close to retirement, you're burnt out, you basically want to get back what you've invested. It's something that needs to be considered highly, and there's ways to go about it. So let's talk about selling a business in the skilled trades. HVAC, refrigeration, could be plumbing, could be electrical. This
Right.
is something that you're involved in. So do you just want to give us a minute or two of how you got involved in that and how you help other people do this?
Yeah,
Or how
sure.
you help broker this?
Yeah, that'd be great. Thanks so much. So I started this business 6 years ago. I'm 67, almost 68. I own and run a handful of businesses over a 40-year career. I sold a business 10 years ago. I tried to retire. I wasn't very good at it. I wanted to find something to do. And for a variety of reasons, I decided to get into the M&A space. I had bought and sold 3 or 4 businesses over a 40-year career, and I sort
What
of
is
knew
what is M&A?
merger and acquisition.
Merger and
Yeah,
acquisition. Okay.
yeah. So what our firm does, we work with business owners that are service providers and contractors in the trades, residential, industrial, and commercial focused. And this includes about 25 different subsectors: HVAC, plumbing, electrical, roofing, garage door, lawn care, landscaping, foundation repair, fire and safety, anything inside or outside a home, an industrial, or a commercial building. Our clients fall into one of two categories. Our clients are the business owner, and they fall into one of two categories. They're either thinking about selling the business in the near term, and they want to know what the value of the business is and who potential buyers would be and what a transaction structure would look like and what a timeline would be, both to get the business sold and for them to transition out. Or they're thinking longer term, maybe 2 years plus, but they think they still might want to sell the business at some point down the road. The second categories are thinking longer term, 2 years plus, but they think they still might want to sell the business at some point down the road. And they want to know what the value of the business is today and the kind of things they need to be focused on to increase the value and increase the marketability of the business so that when it comes time to potentially sell it, they can have the best outcome possible. So we've got an advisory piece of our business for those that want to sell in the near term, and we've got a consulting piece of our business for those that are wanting to grow and scale, potentially for a future sale.
Okay. Most of the people listening here are probably wondering how to grow and scale a business for a future sale. I would say maybe there's a couple out there that are listening that are ready to sell, but I would say most that are listening, just a guess from myself and my audience, is that most are looking to grow and scale. So can you give us some tips on how to grow and scale a business to get it to the point where it is at max value and it's ready to be sold? Just some things. Like, I mean, it's debatable on some of the things are debatable, like wrapped vehicles. That, I mean, it's a cost, it's overhead, it takes some capital to get a vehicle wrapped, but it's a one-time thing. It's not like it's a consistent bill coming in. Like just for instance, something like a van wrap on all your vehicles. Is that something that can increase the value of your business?
It is, but let's first answer the question, how do you determine the value of the business? Okay.
Okay.
At the end of the day, the value of any business, and it doesn't matter if we're talking about Amazon or we're talking about Apple or Facebook or my business or your business or a listener's business, The value of the business is a multiple of what the business's true cash flow profit is. Okay? A multiple of the true cash flow profit.
Okay.
Let's first define what true cash flow profit is. If you look at your profit and loss statement, and probably most of your listeners, they're perhaps using QuickBooks or some sort of financial reporting system similar to QuickBooks. If you look at your QuickBooks statement, if you look at the profit and loss at the end of a calendar year, let's say the business is doing $1 million, and let's say on the P&L that your QuickBooks files generates, let's say that it shows the business is making $150,000. Okay. Now, within that $150,000, there is owner's compensation, owner's benefits, certain personal expenses that the owner is running through the business also, and non-reoccurring charges. And so you want to take all of that owner's comp, you want to add all of that back, you want to determine what the actual free cash flow profit is. So let's say with all of those adjustments, the free cash flow profit of this business is $250,000. It's doing $1 million of sales, and its cash flow profit is $250,000. A buyer's going to look at that $250,000, and a buyer's going to pay you a multiple of that cash flow. They might pay you 2 times, they might pay you 3 times, they might pay you 4 times. And buyers measure their risk by the consistency and the predictability, their ability to grow that cash flow. So $1 million business that's kicking off $250,000 of cash flow, buyer's probably going to pay between 3 and 4 times cash flow for the business. That means the business is worth between $750,000 and $1 million. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if someone's going to buy the business, if they're going to write you a check for $1 million, what are they buying? They're buying the business's ability to produce that cash flow. Okay. Trucks, equipment, inventory, website, client list, employees, anything needed to produce that cash flow, they're expecting that to come with the sale of the business. Okay. Now, you ask the question, how do you increase the value of the business? Well, you increase the value of the business by doing 2 things. You increase the value of the business by growing the cash flow, and you increase the value of the business by removing the risk. How do you remove the risk? Well, you build up infrastructure within the business where the business is able to run independent of the business owner.
Mm-hmm.
And so as businesses grow and scale, the employee base increases, departments begin to be formed, management teams begin to be put in place, owner's responsibility changes, the business becomes less dependent upon the owner. Let's say we've got a business that's doing $10 million of revenue.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say it's a 25% net margin business. Let's say it's producing $2.5 million of cash flow. Okay. If it's doing $10 million and it's in the trades, it's got 30 to 40 employees. I mean, you've got a marketing department, you've got a sales department, you've got an ops department, you've got a controller, you've got an HR person, you've got a field management team. I mean, you've got a real company now.
Yeah.
And the owner, he's managing the managers. He's not in the weeds of the business any longer. It's a very different business. The business has much less dependency on the owner from a day-to-day standpoint because he's got a management team and he's got infrastructure in place. When a buyer looks at this business, a buyer is going to look at that $2.5 million of cash flow. A buyer's going to look at the infrastructure that's there. A buyer's going to look at the management team that's there. A buyer's going to look at the number of employees that's there. A buyer's going to look at the dependency that the business has on the owner. And the buyer's going to say, you know what? There's less risk in this business because you've got a real management team. Therefore, they're going to pay a higher multiple for the business. And so you get a double bump. I mean, you've got $2.5 million of cash flow. which is a lot higher than 250,000.
Mhm.
But instead of paying a multiple of 3 to 4 times, they might pay a multiple of 5 times, 6 times, 7 times. And so, I mean, you've got a business that's where the value of the business is actually greater than what the sales are. It changes the equation. Going back, this is a long answer to a short question.
I like the explanation, and I like the way you laid it out, so I'm
What do
I'm
you
I'm
do
enjoying
to
this.
increase the value? You increase the profitability of the business. You reduce the risk in the business by having more clients, by having a management team, by changing what the revenue mix is from a, project construction oriented business to a service and maintenance business. I mean, think about it now. If 80% of your business is construction oriented, compare the predictability and the consistency of that versus a service and maintenance business where 80% of your business is service and maintenance and replacement oriented. Service
Mhm.
and maintenance business, it's much more predictable cash flow.
Yeah, for
Therefore,
sure.
buyers are going to
Yeah.
pay a much higher multiple for that.
Yeah, because, I mean, we all know, or we should all know that the construction side of things, flows with the economy. The economy
It does.
slows
It
down.
does.
Yeah,
Interest
and
rates, the
yeah.
economy, what's going on in your market. If you're dealing with home developers, who's active in what space. I mean, and this is sometimes where, guys in the trades, they focus on generating as much cash flow profit as they can in the beginning because they've got to get the business up and going.
Mhm.
And they're, chasing jobs and chasing jobs and chasing jobs. But at a certain point, they need to be thinking about how they're going to exit from this thing and the things that they can be doing internally within the business to increase what the value of the business is when it comes time to sell. I mean, one of the most important things they can do in addition to growing the business and growing the management team is changing the business to the extent that they can from a construction oriented business to a service and maintenance business because that's going to command a higher multiple.
Mhm. Yeah, because, I mean, service and maintenance, everything, the economy or the machinery doesn't care what the economy is doing. It's gonna break when it breaks. So you always need someone to fix and service and maintain. And you get into different aspects of the industry where you're working on critical equipment that could call you out at 3 a.m. Doesn't matter what the time of day is, doesn't matter what temperature it is outside, doesn't matter if you gotta stand on a roof or in a container where a lot of these, like, cell phone towers and stuff are based.
100.
Stuff like
I mean, look at what happened during COVID. I mean, the new construction part of the market came to a grinding halt, but the service and maintenance part became an essential service, and it continued just to grind along, grind along.
Yeah, I know some people that their businesses thrived during COVID, and one of the reasons, and this is I've talked to multiple people about this, is that people were working from home or staying at
Mhm.
home, and they noticed while they're working at home, they're not usually home at 1 p.m. or 2 p.m. in the afternoon. They're
Yeah,
like, "Man, my house it's either cold or hot. It's uncomfortable in here. I'm just noticing this now." And they started to do some upgrades on their homes, and people were doing renovations. And that's why we had things like cost of a 2x4 was going way up because everybody
right,
was buying them up. There wasn't
right,
that many around anymore. So
right.
yeah, I totally agree that it's more valuable because I've been in service and maintenance most of my career, and I've never had a day off in my entire
Right,
life, right?
right, the phone
If I
just keeps
didn't
ringing.
if I didn't if I want a day off, sure.
Yeah,
As an entrepreneur now, I take the days off when I need
yeah,
them or when I want them.
yeah,
But when
yeah,
I was working for a contractor, I could have worked 80 hours a week if I wanted to
yeah,
because the amount of service and maintenance, that was in front of me, it was never
right.
ending. I like the way you structured that is to remove risk and to create more cash flow. That's how you're gonna make your business more valuable. Is there anything that you see? Because I asked you a question off the top, like a van wrap, because I wanted to know legit in your space if you see things like van wraps or using CRM tools or anything like this that's small and you may not think, wow, that's going to increase the value of my business. Is there anything like that that you see that you can slowly implement to start increasing value? in a business?
There's not a silver bullet. I mean,
Yeah.
and it's not if I do this, all of a sudden the business is going to double in value overnight. I don't think
Yeah.
that's the answer. We recommend is, okay, let's do a valuation and let's look at where your business is today. Okay.
Mhm.
And let's look at where you want to grow the business to over the next year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, whatever the timeline is. Okay. You might have a business that's doing 500,000 of revenue today, and you want to grow it in the next 7 years to a $5 million business. I mean, just to throw a number out. Okay.
Yep.
So you know where the business is today. You know where you want to get to in 5 years from a valuation standpoint. Okay. Let's put a pro forma and projection together in terms of how the business needs to perform year over year over the next 7 years to get there. And it might mean the business needs to grow at 20% a year. I mean, whatever the growth rate is, the growth rate is. It's just putting numbers on a spreadsheet. But now you know where you are. You know where you want to get to from a financial standpoint. You've got an idea of what that bridge looks like. Okay. Then the thing that you've got to do is you've got to begin transforming the business to follow what that bridge is. And I mean, you've got to look at marketing, you've got to look at sales, you've got to look at operations, you've got to look at your financial team, you got to look at your finances, you got to look at your HR team, you've got to look at recruiting, you've got to look at your field management team. You've got to look at all the different areas that need to be managed over this 7-year period. And you need to start biting tasks and responsibilities and to-dos in chunks in order, every month, every quarter, every 6 months, every year, you need to make progress in terms of building over time what it ultimately needs to be. And, you talked about wrapping trucks. Well, there's probably a checklist in marketing of 15 different things you need to work on to increase what your visibility is, to increase what your lead flow is, to increase what your conversion is, to increase what your branding is. And certainly wrapping would be one of those. But it's not the silver bullet that's going to cause the size of your business to 10x
Yeah.
over. It's one of many things that needs to be done. That's part of a holistic marketing plan that fits into a holistic sales plan, that fits into a holistic ops plan. And so it's all part of a much strategic plan that needs to be executed bit by bit. And this is where I think, guys get stuck is, they sort of muscle their way through at a certain point, and then, they get stuck because they don't know what to do next. Having a fresh set of eyes, sort of look at the business, look at how you got to where you are, look at what your financials look like, look at what your margins look like, look at what your cash flow looks like. There are lots of different things that sort of need to be tackled. Plus, you've got a business to run in the meantime.
Yeah.
And so you've got to make it all doable.
Exactly. And I want to go back to what you said earlier about the owner of the business. It's more valuable to a buyer if the owner does not have to be micromanaging and stepping in
100%.
daily. Yeah. And I mean, I've had this conversation with guys like Ken Goodrich. He's been on my podcast. Do you know who Ken is?
Right.
So I mean, and he wrote or helped write the one book on creating systems. And I forget the original author's name now. It's Michael E. Gerber. That's who it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, I've listened to the books. What I took out of it is how they're comparing it, or how originally it was being compared to McDonald's, how McDonald's
Yeah.
basically has a book of systems. You basically take that book of systems and you can pop it up anywhere in the world and anybody can run a McDonald's. And that's why McDonald's pops up everywhere and their burgers are the same everywhere you go. They taste the same. They look the same, is because this book of systems has been in place and built up so that anybody can open a McDonald's, and a burger in, you know what I mean, PEI Canada is the same as a burger in California.
Yes.
Because
Wow.
that book of systems is telling you how to create that book. And it's no different for a plumbing service business
Exactly
or
the
HVAC
same.
service business. That book of systems is, if it's created and done correctly, you can get the right management team miles away, and they can pop that business up somewhere else. Do you agree
Yeah,
on that?
yeah, and so think about a plumbing business that's doing a residential plumbing business that's doing $1 million a year of revenue. That's 80% service and maintenance oriented. Okay, it's the owner, two or three techs in the field, and someone in the office. Okay, that's what the business looks like. Okay, and the owner's involved in everything. I mean, there are processes, but the processes reside in the owner's head, and
Yeah.
and he's doing everything. And so, the process is the way he just naturally handles anything that comes up and various responsibilities off. Okay. So this guy wants to grow this business from $1 million to $10 million. Well, at $10 million, he's going to have 40 employees. How does he get 40 employees following the processes that he thinks are appropriate? It's got to be documented. It's got to be written down. It's got to be part of the training culture. I mean, people need to be educated on it, and people need to be held accountable, and people need to be rewarded, and it all needs to be part of the culture.